I want to welcome everybody to the 23rd in a series of free webinars for peer supporters. This webinar series is presented by members of the International Association of Peer Supporters, known as I.N.A.P.S, with generous assistance from Awesome, without whom the series would not be possible. I.N.A.P.S is solely responsible for the content of the webinar. The webinar will begin at noon Eastern, and again, thank you for your participation. Signing in the webinar, you're going to see that your telephone number, you cannot have an extension on your phone number if you want this to call you back. You may submit questions and offer contributions during the webinar using the chat function only. I have somebody monitoring the chat function, so telephones will be muted, and I ask you to please use the chat function. And when you use the chat function, I need you to take and go up to the very top of the screen where it says everyone, so that everyone is seeing what you're writing down. So please go to the very top of the screen in the chat box, click on the down box, click on everyone, and that way everyone will be able to see the questions that you're asking. Again, we have a disclaimer. This is going to be recorded. If you have a problem with that, we're letting you know that this clearly is, if you prefer not to be identified by name, please go back out and sign in to the webinar without using your name anonymously. And we thank you for your participation. I'm Peter Ashenden. I'm the Director of Consumer Affairs for Optum Health Behavioral Solutions. I've had the pleasure of working in this series now with I.N.A.P.S for quite some time, I believe from the inception, if I'm not mistaken, but Rita could correct me if I'm wrong. And I do appreciate all of you taking and attending. I think you're going to find that this is a very interesting and very thought-provoking webinar, and we have one of the best speakers in the world, as far as I'm concerned. I've known Lori for some period of time. We've worked together on many different projects. She is somebody who's truly insightful. She knows what it is to have the lived experience. And again, I think we're very fortunate to have somebody of her caliber being willing to take and offer her information that she's worked years to develop, and she's willing to share with all of us. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Lori Ashcroft, please.
Thank you, Peter, and welcome to all of you. I can no longer see participants or chats, so I'm not sure who you all are, but welcome. I recognized some names earlier on, so welcome to all of you. Just a little bit about me, so you know who's talking to you. As Peter said, I'm a person with lived experience. Early teens, late childhood is when I really started struggling with a variety of symptoms. And they were later diagnosed as depression, anxiety, and then that led to an eating disorder. And like most of us, the older we get, the more diagnoses we get. They never seem to fall off the other end. We just keep collecting them. But those are the ones I still take medication for. I still hard to overcome. And so I've learned to learn from them. And that's a big part of what resilience is. So we'll get a lot further into that as we go along. So, and Peter, I think you're going to be changing the slides for me. So
I certainly am, and there you go.
All right. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. One of the first things that I want to kind of guide us through, pack a little bit, is the definition of resilience and how it's different from the concept of recovery. There's a space there between those two and a distinction, and we're going to unpack that and look at it. Then we're going to look at the benefits and limitations of the recovery framework. We've never talked about this before. We've been so happy to have recovery, that we have at how it might be holding us back a little bit. So we're going to look at that. And then we're going to look at pain. And let me just tell you right now, I am not the poster child for pain. I have tried very hard to avoid it most of my life, and sometimes very unsuccessfully. A lot of us avoid pain through addictions. Probably everyone in the world does that to some extent. And we don't take time to look at it and let it teach us. So we're going to look at that. And I'm as scared about this as you might be. We'll just get into it together. And then we're going to look at what happens when we focus on resilience. And then finally, we're going to describe some strategies for building resilience in our own lives, because we sometimes leave ourselves out of this, and in the lives of people we support. So that's what the next hour is going to look like, I think. We'll move on from here, Peter.
There you go.
Okay. So the first thing let's do is just celebrate recovery. I can remember when I first started hearing about recovery. It was the mid 1990s. It was maybe 1997, 6. And my mentor, Bill Anthony, some of you know Bill, started talking about it and writing about it. He never claimed ownership of it, because he gave that to the folks who were recovering. But he was the messenger. And I remember my first thoughts about recovery had to do with, well, that's really interesting. I've never heard the word recovery used in anything but substance use. So I guess people could recover from a mental illness. And then I realized that I was those people that could recover. And it just was like a moment for me to realize all the things I put in place to cope with symptoms and mental illnesses and side effects and so forth that were holding me in place. There was a whole other place I could step to, and that's called recovery. So I, like many of us, latched onto that possibility because of what it could mean for ourselves, and also for the people that we worked with. This was in my experience, this was 3 or 4 years before we really kicked into using peers. So it was early, and for myself, I had just recently started telling people that I had a mental illness. Up till about 1995, this had been a secret I had kept. Probably a lot of people had their suspicions, but I didn't confirm them. So here was a whole new place to go, and I didn't have a lot of people to talk to it about, just a few, because there weren't many of us talking about it in those days. But as we talked with each other, we realized that we could go to a whole new place, and there was a whole new space to grow into that we didn't quite know yet. Now, keep that space in mind, because I'm going to come back to that when we start talking about resilience. So just put it in your parking lot for now, and we'll move on. You'll recognize it when I come back around. So let's move on, Peter. Okay, so another one of my early mentors was Dr. Martin Seligman. Some of you probably remember reading his material. Gosh, I think it was in the 70s. He was a young graduate student, and he witnessed some experiments with dogs, where the experimenters were literally teaching dogs to be helpless and hopeless. And he started wondering if we could teach people to be helpless and hopeless. maybe we could unteach that. And he recognized the potential of that. So he and his colleague went back into the lab and started teaching the dogs how to get over hopelessness and helplessness. And it took a long time, but he succeeded. And from there, he said, if we can teach dogs how to overcome helplessness and hopelessness, A, it's a learned reaction. B, we can unlearn it. And in the early 90s, he hadn't yet become the chair of the American Psychiatric Association. That should be, Psychological Association. That should actually be APA there. Sorry, my mistake on this slide. And his platform, when he did become the chair, was positive psychology. And he was the first person to start writing about positive psychology. And now, you can look up positive psychology, and there's a zillion people that write about it. But he was the father and founder of it. And he went on to, in his own way, start building a belief around this with lots of evidence. So, and then, of course, I think most of you are familiar with other researchers who chimed in on this. Courtney Harding was another researcher who did seminal work on recovery and showed that people could recover. So, beginning to build proof, a scientific proof, that recovery was not just something imagining that we were doing, but it was a real thing. Okay, you can, Peter. So, back to what's beyond recovery, I started wondering what was beyond recovery maybe about 4 years ago. And I wrote a book called Reinventing Broken Systems, Fixing Case Management. And my motivation for writing this book was I didn't like the way case management was being done. I saw it as a service that had remarkable potential because it was kind of being at the right place at the right time with people and having the ability to help them recover. And instead, I saw so many cases of it really kind of trapping people in a system instead of moving them on into recovery. So I wrote this book. The last chapter of the book is about, I think I called it something about integration, because there was a lot of talk going on about community integration, which frankly was not a term I was impressed with, because I first heard that term in the late 60s when I was moving people out of state hospitals, and we were calling it community integration. And in fact, it had nothing, it was like moving, being reinstitutionalized in the community, not integrating in its community. So hearing the term again was not impressive to me. But I was intrigued by it. So I started thinking, okay, if we were really going to become part of the community, what would that take? What would it take? Not the pretend reintegration, but what is it? And that's when I started thinking, what's beyond recovery? And I'll tell you, to start believing that there was a step beyond recovery, for me, took courage. Because I, like a lot of people, was still so happy about recovery. I'm thinking, oh, we've got it. We're in good shape here. People are recovering. And they were, but they weren't moving on. They were so much better off. And I had a front row seat, not just because I had my own personal experience to deal with, but I was working in a program where we were hiring more and more peers, and we had more and more people recovering on. So I watched this for 10 years before I wrote this book. So it's not like I got it right away. So what I could see over and over again is people were recovering. They were owning their story. They were owning their wellness. But and having a regular life. They were still hanging around in services, and the services were still their life. So I thought, you know what? There's something more out there. I don't know how to get there. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but there's something there, and we need to find it. Those of us who were the pioneers around recovery need to be the ones to step out and find this next step. And I started calling that step, for lack of a better term, plus I kind of liked it, resilience. So let's move to the next slide, Peter. If you guys are chatting, I'm sorry, I can't see you, so I can't respond to anything.
You have the chat taken care of. Scott will keep on top of that, Lori.
I'll let you know if there's a question that comes up, Lori.
Thank you. So, why did we stay in recovery for so long? I started asking myself that question. Other than it was just a happier place to be than where we were before, why didn't we say we can be even happier? So, why? Well, we're all afraid of change. I remember in the early days telling people they could recover, and they insisted they couldn't. And they were mad at me for bringing it up. It took a few times. It took kind of building an environment or a culture or a community of belief before people could start to not be afraid and feel like it was safe enough to step into that recovery zone. So fear of change, not believing in our own potential or the potential of the people we serve, kind of thinking, well, that's probably the best you can do, or that's probably the best I can do. I mean, this is better than I've ever done. This must be the best I can do. And then there was no safe place to, even now, when I talk about moving on, taking our recovery toward resilience, where are we going? I mean, we need to figure that out together. And then finally, we need to get clear on how do I earn membership into a community. If I'm going to move into a community, how do I belong? And most of you know that for, 8 or 9 years, I've written a column in Behavioral Healthcare Magazine. And if any of you are interested in that, just Google Behavioral Healthcare Magazine, put in Lori Ashcroft, and you'll find all these things in the archives you can read. So in one of them, I printed this out this morning so I could read it to you. Because I wrote this, maybe 3 years ago. And because I was just immersed in this question and of what is the next step. And what came to me is we're all thinking that community integration is about getting the community ready to receive people. And we worked on stigma and we worked on discrimination. We did all these things. Made a little bit of difference. But it didn't change what I was seeing. I didn't see people owning their rightful place in the community. And I decided that the reason is because we haven't taught people how to contribute. I started thinking about my own community. And my own community is like my family, my 12-step group, my spiritual friends. I mean, we all have our own unique little communities. Amazon was in my community because I'm buying books from them all the time. So I thought, if I stopped contributing to those communities, everyone would be pretty nice to me at first, and they'd start taking care of me. Then if I didn't show up, they wouldn't miss me. So I thought, we need to start helping people learn how to be a strong member, a valued member in their community, the go-to person in their community. And so I was at this conference at the Carter Center, and I'm just going to read this to you. I've never read anything on a webinar before, so I hope this works. So, this was a group of really smart people I was in. It was a subgroup. It was led by the famous one and only, one of the most amazing people on the planet, Ron Manderscheid. So he's leading this group. So I'm sitting there and I'm saying, while the contributors of the group were interesting, I began to be troubled by what a number of the group members were saying. They seemed to be focused on creating community acceptance of those who are recovering from mental illnesses and thinking about this challenge in terms of research study design. I wanted to scream. I didn't want to talk about fixing communities. I wanted to talk about how people in recovery could be prepared to play valuable roles, about how they could build social capital, and about how through reciprocal processes of give and take, they could take ownership of their rightful places in communities of their choice, and in so doing, sustain and strengthen their own recovery process. So I wondered, why was this group of really smart people going down the same old path of trying to fix the community? Couldn't they see that recovering people need to take responsibility for creating their own value in the community? Now, I've learned through painful experience that just blurting this sort of thing out would cause me not to be part of the community. So I bounced my leg, sighed frequently, drifted off to my own thoughts about the subject, checked back in now and again to see if anything had changed. It hadn't. So that's where I was about 3 years ago. The next day, just so you know it had a happy ending, Ron said, well, Lori, what do you think? And he'd already talked to me ahead of time and knew what I was going to say. So I said my side of it, and together we agreed that indeed we need to keep fixing the community, partner term fix. But we need to balance that by, first of all, giving people the confidence and the skills and the tools they need to be a valued member, not a member that you feel sorry for, not a member that you take care of, not a member that you give a free gym pass to, but a valued member. And having spent my life with among my peers of people who are struggling with mental illness, I know that 99% of us can be a valued member of any community we choose. I totally, absolutely believe that. So that's where I've come to with this. So let's go to the next slide, Peter. So taking the resilience challenge. So here, sometimes I do this. I say things and then they're on the next slide. So here we go. So becoming a valued member of our own unique community, contributing and not just consuming, and then this whole thing about reciprocity, interdependence. Those are key terms in resilience because when we really figure out how to give and take, how to truly be interdependent, not just pretend, but truly interdependent, able to ask for help, able to give help, then we've started building resilience. In my own experience with resilience, if I didn't have friends who would tell me the truth, who would comfort me, who would cry with me, I couldn't be resilient. Peter, okay, there, I just lost everything, but I got it back. Okay, so I think I carried on about this enough, so let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so interdependence, reciprocity. Here's the next one. This one's an owie. I talked a tiny bit about it earlier, but so I'm just going to go back a little bit. When I first started figuring out a protocol or a practice that we could use to help people recover, I focused completely on strengths. I didn't even want people to talk about what hurt them, except in their personal story, and that was like, okay, then what happened and now how are you now? And I think the reason I did that is because I still couldn't spend much time with my own pain. And I think, those of us who've had to deal with symptoms, if we start feeling a little pain, we get scared because sometimes that's what takes us over the edge. I didn't want to spend much time with my own pain. On the other hand, just so this doesn't sound like a completely self-centered thing I did, I really think that maybe if you think of the progression of what we were going through with recovery, maybe none of us could do that, because all we'd ever heard up to that point from our doctors and case managers and blah, 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 was what was wrong with us. I mean, nobody talked anything about our strengths. I remember early on talking with people about their strengths, and they would say, well, no one's ever asked me about my strengths before. No one's ever asked me what I want to do. So we were in a culture where maybe focusing solely on strengths was the only way to pull us out of where we were at the moment. And we were counterbalancing all our previous input around everything that was wrong with us. So now, several years down the road, I'm thinking, oh, this whole thing about resilience, we need to stay focused on our strengths, but to build resilience, we can't waste our pain. We've got to be willing to learn from it. And we've got to have the courage to experience it. And we've got to have enough reciprocity and interdependence that people can go with us on a pure level, not as someone trying to fix us, but on a pure level trying to stay with us through this process. I, earlier this year, had one of the most painful experiences in my whole life. And I honestly thought, okay, this is it. This is the time I'm not going to recover. I'm gone. I'm out of here. I'm down for the count. And I would call that grieving and mourning. There's a difference between those two, and I think I was doing them both at the same time. And but I could, underneath all of that, not right away, maybe a month or two into it, I could start to hear another part of me. And I'm going to make reference to this now over the next few slides. And I don't have it in a slide, so pay attention to what I'm going to say right now, because you won't see it. What started coming up for me in that period of where I thought I could never come back is I started feeling something inside of me. And I'm going to call it spirit. So if we think of body, mind, spirit, you know what we do? We're always trying to take care of our health nowadays. We can't even sit down very long anymore. Sitting is bad. Sugar's bad, blah, blah, blah. Everything is bad. So we have to do all these things. Then there's our mind. So we've all been working on our mind forever. We take pills, we do meditation, everything. But we don't talk too much about our spirit. And what I've come to learn is that spirit is one of our strongest assets. And I was hearing this when people talked about recovery. Early on, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I started doing a little study of my own, and I would say to people, okay, what is it that helped you recover? And 9 out of 10 people would mention something that was not body and not mind. And they would call it spirit. And I started calling it spirit. Now, those of you who know me know that I have a strong spiritual connection anyway, and it's always been a huge part of my recovery. But I didn't realize how universal it was. I thought I was just unusual. Nope. Sorry, Lori. You're just ordinary. We all need to hear that, but that's what it came down to. So that little thing that started coming up for me in the midst of this mourning and grieving was a spirit, a part of my spirit. And it was saying to me, I am still here and so are you. And it's up to you. What do you want to do? Do you want to, go sit by the river and meditate? Or do you want to keep giving back? Are you through giving back? And over the next few days, I realized how badly I wanted to keep contributing and learning. And that was the beginning of this resilience kicking in. But I had to go through that pain and experience that. Then I could go back and say, okay, now what can I learn from this? I can learn that I can feel a lot of pain and it can't take me out. I got that I'm really strong if I can get through this. This is really strong. Now, there's some things I've learned here that I'm not going to ever do again because they hurt. There's some other things I'm going to do over and over again, and I don't care if they hurt because they're what I believe in and they're what I want to put forward in the world. So that's all about using pain to be resilient. Now, I've been writing a lot about this lately. I can tell you, I can give you a 5-day, 80-hour, 2-week workshop on pain. So we're just touching the tip of the iceberg here. But it's a critical part of building resilience, and I just wanted to give you a taste of it. Okay, Peter, let's move on.
And Lori, I just want to let you know that it's approximately 20 minutes till the hour.
Okay, so I've got 10 more minutes, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. So here's a quote about maybe a difference between recovery and resilience. This comes from, many of you know Dr. Ken Minkoff, and Ken and I do editing for each other sometimes. So he read some stuff that I'd written and gave me some feedback on it, and he says, Lori, I think what you're saying is that recovery is moving away from a painful past, while building resilience is moving toward a brighter future. And Chris Martin keeps reminding me of this. I think it's such a great definition. Here's a little longer one. Resilience is the ability to bounce back, recover, and develop a stronger capacity to respond to adversities in the future. It's less about bouncing back than it is springing towards something greater. Now, I'm going to show you a bell curve near the end of this talk, and you'll see what I mean by that. So hold this in your mind because we're going to get back to it. Okay, let's move to the next slide. Okay, so this is just a quick little list I put together here. Again, we could go on for days about every one of these, but let's just, so if we're resilient, we're more self-guided. We have a broadened viewpoint. We don't take everything personally. We see a traumatic experience in the light of our past successes and our future hope. That's what I mean by broadened perspective. We become interdependent. That's that giving, taking, reciprocity thing, very important. Sharing power. So, we own our own power, and we share other people's power. We're not above or below anything else. And appropriate interventions. I'm going to tell you more about, I think it's on the next slide, I'm going to tell you more about that. So let's move to the next. Oh, and you know what I would add to that one before we move on is spiritual competence. And here I'm not talking about Buddhists or Baptists or Episcopalians or anything else. I'm just talking about that part of each one of us that is spirit. We each have a spirit, even if we're an atheist or an agnostic, we have a spirit. When we connect our spirit to a greater spirit, then then we have something called spirituality. And that's an amazing part of resilience that you can choose to use to become more and more resilient. Okay, let's move on. Okay, here's that bell curve I told you about. Remember Seligman, I talked with you earlier. A phrase he uses is people get stronger in broken places. The choice is ours. So just take a look at this curve. And he uses this to talk about trauma and being resilient when you get into trauma. So at the far left, you see those little green things down there. Those are the people that have a traumatic experience and they never get over it. It becomes their primary identity. It's their ref point for the whole life experience, and they keep going back over and over that traumatic experience. Now, what we know about trauma is it's not necessarily what happens to you, it's how you experience it. So some people, you can see the bell curve now, more and more people get right up to the middle point, that red line down the middle. This is where most people end up, right in there. That's why it's a bell curve. That's where most of us end up, and that's the point at which we have a serious trauma, and we move on. We get over the trauma. And then we go down fewer and fewer and fewer people down to the bottom on the right-hand side. These are the people who don't just get over trauma. They get stronger because of it. They get stronger, smarter, more capable. They have more self-efficacy and self-esteem because of it. So when I talk about building resilience, I'm not just settling for the whole red line. I want us to move over there to the right-hand side where we can help people become stronger as a result of whatever they've gone through. And that's what I'm calling resilience. That's what we're aiming for. That's what I'm aiming for. And I'm hoping you'll come with me. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay. Now, a lot of you know this guy. This is Tigger. And he's the eternal optimist. And his straight man, that little donkey named Igor, who always sees everything from the bad side of things. So Tigger is always trying to be happy and cheering him up. Now, Chris Martin told me something I didn't know about Tigger. Look at Tigger's tail. Chris Martin tells me that Tigger's tail is a spring. This means that Tigger uses what's behind him to spring forward. I think that's pretty good. So in the next slide, Tigger has some words for us. Let's bounce forward in resilience to be a greater us. So I'm going to stop right there. You can probably tell from the tone of my voice, I could go on for hours, but I won't subject you to that. So let's chat. Any questions, comments?
Lori, I want to thank you for doing an excellent job of presenting a very difficult subject, and a subject that we all need to be paying attention to. So thank you for bringing this in a very clear and concise way. Those of you that are on the call, please use the chat box to ask questions of Lori. We'll try to get to all of them. If we can't, we will be taking and copying your questions and putting answers on the website for you. So if you don't get an answer to your question, check back in the website within a week or so, and hopefully we'll have your question answered for you. Rita, did I do that correctly or did I do that incorrectly? And I guess Rita's not there at the moment, so I must have done it correctly then.
I think she's on mute, yeah.
I'm just putting the quiz up right now, so it'll be up in a minute.
Okay. And it is okay for people, if we don't get to the questions, we will answer them on the website. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, that's correct, Peter. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So we're getting lots of thank yous, Lori.
Oh, good. Well, thank you guys for sticking with me for a whole hour and listening to me carry on about this. You can tell I'm pretty passionate about it. I just regret that we couldn't.
Lori, I think Scott is trying to say something.
Okay.
One of the participants, Dennis Wetzel, had indicated during the slide with the definition that said bright future and a wonderful definition. And then we have Something from participant Sundance says, one of the slides identified that we not relive our negative experiences, yet in the last 15 years of therapy, the model has been to relive my negative experiences over and over again. Combat-related PTSD. Please comment.
Well, that's a common practice with PTSD. It's kind of an old model. It used to be the best practice for treating PTSD. It no longer is. There's a lot of other ways to do it, and if you've been redoing it for 15 years, I would say that's enough. The other thing is, with with all the veterans returning and all this stuff about PTSD, the early years of people returning, there was a lot of hopelessness around PTSD, and then you start seeing people writing about life beyond PTSD, getting stronger because of it. Now there's a lot of stuff out there to read about how PTSD can really be the grounds for a lot of personal growth and character development. So I would just encourage you to stop reliving it and read some of the material out there on using it to become stronger and better. I mean, it's you've had an amazing experience. You can use it to strengthen yourself. You don't have to keep reliving the victim part of it.
Lori, participant Ray Carr asks, what are some ways the peers can help others become resilient?
Well, I think first of all, we have to live it ourselves. If we can be resilient, if we can, have the courage to see what our next step is, and step out there ourselves. I mean, I can tell you from my own experience, and yours might be the same, is that at some point, sometimes you're going to be stepping out and there's not going to be anything under your feet. You're just like stepping out, and if that doesn't work, step back and step over there. This is another part about learning resilience, is having this courage to make mistakes or fail, and just see it all as a learning experience. I'm trying to get away from this. My other phone that's ringing or walking around. Okay, do we have another question?
Participant Janet Williams commented, she said, I love the analogy of Tigger's tail being a spring. It presents a whole new perspective. And then we also have a question from participant Megan Coffey. She says, Lori, how can we counter learned helplessness and the victim role that sometimes is a response to traumas? Strength focus is good, but beyond that, thanks.
I don't have all the answers to everything. I can just tell you what I've learned. Tell me the question again, Scott, because I think I had a better idea than one.
Says, how can we counter learned helplessness and the victim role that sometimes is a response to traumas? Strength focus is good, but beyond that.
Okay, a couple of things come to mind here. One is, and this goes back to the earlier question too, on how can we help people move beyond this, is the sooner we can get people giving back. This is a magic thing, whether they're in early recovery or whether they're starting to build resilience. We haven't done much of this, except for peers. Peers get to give back. Peer support people that are working. But the folks that are, like, I'm just saying, the minute you come into someone gets admitted to a hospital or a crisis center, and the idea is, here's a person who's stable moment, they're in acute something or other, there's nothing they can do. Give them something to do that has some value. It can be a little thing. I mean, even if you're in prison, it can be a little thing. It can be, can you help so-and-so read? Or could you take John a glass of water? Or anything that starts to give that person an idea that they can contribute something. So that will start to break through that identity of there's nothing I can do, and I'm just helpless and hopeless. And the other thing, of course, like you're saying, is to stay focused on the strengths. And sometimes you'll just have to stay there until you build enough strength that they can start looking at the painful things that can teach them things.
Nice job of answering that, Lauren.
Any other questions?
There is a question from John. What resources or books would you suggest for further reading and learning about resilience?
Well, I would go to Martin Seligman's website. Just Google positive psychology, and you don't even have to buy a book. He's got a lot of stuff online, and he'll give you some books to read. And right now my mind is a blank on all the books I've been reading. What I'll do is I'll put some books on the website for you that I found to be particularly helpful over the last 6 months. Another part of this whole thing with resilience is, and we talk about it all the time in recovery, so this isn't new, but it's all the material written on forgiveness and resentment. Letting go of resentments and being able to forgive is a huge part of recovery, but it carries over into resilience. Chris and I and Scott recently created a whole workshop on organizational spirit and how to have a strong organizational spirit. And one of the first steps that needs to happen is to let go of past resentments or grudges, things that hold the whole spirit back among a whole group of people. So forgiveness and letting go of resentments are a huge part of resilience, just as they are a huge part of recovery. Any other questions, Scott?
We have some information from participant Terry that she shared, and I think you'll be able to read those in the comments later. We had a question in regard to whether or not the PowerPoint would be available, and I think Peter said earlier that it would be, correct?
I've got the slide up there now telling people how to get to the website.
Okay, there you go. And another participant asking how to access your writing. Someone did respond to Google Behavioral Healthcare Magazine, which I believe you said earlier as well. Is there any other way to access your other writings, Lori?
Yes, I've written a lot of material that's at the Recovery Opportunity Center, which is part of Recovery Innovations. And they sell a lot of material that I've written. You can go to their website. I think if you just Google ROC, you can get there, Recovery Opportunity Center.
And participant Janet Williams commented, she said, IPS, individual placement and support, is a good tool and resource for helping individuals get back into the workforce. People feel productive and more independent.
Yes, employment is a wonderful way to give back and to get that sense of self-efficacy. It's one of many ways. And this is a whole area that, we've just touched the tip of the iceberg on. And I think what's kept us from going there full force is our limited view of how much better everybody can get. And we've, I went over that too much already probably, but yes, employment's good.
So, Lori, I want to thank you for doing an absolutely fantastic job of presenting a new cutting-edge way of looking at what does happen to us after recovery. There is a whole series of things that happen after recovery, and you certainly have started to bring our attention to that and absolutely offered some great information to our audience, as always. Lori, every time I work on a project with you, you absolutely blow me out of the water. So I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be able to be with us and to share this with all the people lot of people on this call today. So I thank you very, very much for sharing that information with them.
Absolutely, and again, it's my pleasure. And as Peter said, and Rita, if you have more questions or want more information, go to the website, let us know, and we'll be happy to. And I'll send you some. I'll put some. I've written a bunch of other stuff too. I can put on there, other articles and so forth. So I'll tell you how to find more information. And of course, you can always contact me if that's helpful. I'd be happy to talk to any of you further.
Lori, again, thank you so much. Audience, thank you very much for your time today. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. And I hope you all have a very happy Thanksgiving. And don't forget to stay tuned next year when we take and bring you our webinar series again next year. Our plan, and we're taking and working on it now. So keep going back to the website and keep watching the Ed puts out for us